the Bitcoin Beach wallet was really a proof of concept for the Galoy open source Bitcoin banking stack. There's people that would buy cinder blocks if they had extra cash because they know that the price of cinder blocks goes up, right? So that was their savings mechanism and vehicle. Education is just central to everything that you're doing. And also that education does not necessarily mean lecturing. It means like showing, right, and sending sats. Like in Bitcoin Lake, what Patrick used to do, I haven't seen it in a while, is to say, hey, I'm going to throw a pizza party at this merchant who now accepts Bitcoin, and we're going to bring 12 kids over there. Here's our Lightning address. Could you help us fund the pizza party? And like Bitcoin Twitter would fund the pizza party. It's really exciting to see that we all collectively can build together and like really build a better banking system. If the bank sticks their head in the sand and decides not to find any way to evaluate or test the sort of the business value of being integrated with Bitcoin and Lightning, I don't think they're going to be around for the next 20 or 30 years.
Andrew Begin is the Director of Marketing at Galoy, an open source Bitcoin banking platform. In our conversation, we explored the task of building and sustaining Bitcoin communities like Bitcoin Beach and Bitcoin Jungle, the tools that Galoy is building to help these communities thrive, and then we explored enterprise Lightning adoption. If you enjoyed this show and if you learned something new, the best way that you guys can show your support is by sending in sats over the Lightning Network. You can use any of the podcasting 2.0 apps out there today. There are dozens of them, but my favorite one to use is Fountain. Before we get into today's show, just a quick message from our sponsors. Today's show is sponsored by Voltage. Voltage is the premier provider of Bitcoin and Lightning node infrastructure. Today's show is also sponsored by Stackwork. And Stackwork is a Lightning-powered transcription tool that takes the best of AIs and humans to create better, faster, and less expensive transcripts. We'll have more from Voltage and Stackwork later in the show. Andrew, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to talk about all that you're building at Galoy. Before we get into it, let's give listeners a background of yourself, how you discovered the Lightning Network, why you decided to build on it, and just a high-level overview of Galoy's business for those who have not seen the previous episode I've done.
Yeah, for sure. Andrew, I come from, let's say, before Bitcoin, like 15 years or so in the digital marketing and advertising space. Spent about a decade in San Diego, but East Coast native for the most part. Let's see. Like many people, I watched Bitcoin fly by, just like in the boat in the early years, and kind of took an interesting glance and said, "Oh, that's interesting." And but it wasn't until probably 2019, 2020 that I started tumbling into the rabbit hole, and did so quite fast and quite hard. Coming from a background in sort of marketing and advertising, you not always, but oftentimes you're working for big banks, big tech, big healthcare. You're working for things that are, you're not quite sure if you're solving the problems that we experience today, or you're contributing to them. And the more you dig into Bitcoin and you see the aligned incentives and the principles and the potential for building on Bitcoin, I quickly decided that I needed to dedicate sort of my attention, my life to building on it. It was actually Jack Dorsey was interviewed by Alex Gladstein in Bitcoin conference, I think 2021. And on that day, he announced they'd be building a hardware wallet, and he said something to the effect of, "Bitcoin's the most important thing in my life, and I'm going to be working on it." Which was interesting for me specifically, coming from the marketing and advertising world. I had respected, Jack from the earlier days, and there's a tweet that I think about probably twice a week from Dennis Parker that says, "When you finally understand Bitcoin, you're going to have a panic attack." And I was like deep in this moment where successive panic attacks of like, wow, this is world changing technology. And I think that moment really gelled it for me. I was like, I'm ready to go work in Bitcoin. So dusted off the resume and started getting out there. And I found Galoy, really lucky to find Galoy. We built the Bitcoin Beach wallet in El Salvador pre, the Bitcoin law, and was really ramping up the team at that point. So I joined in as director of marketing. And then the last point about Galoy, so we build open source Bitcoin banking infrastructure for allowing enterprises, communities, cities to build and connect to Bitcoin and Lightning. Um, it's a full stack. We could get into the parts of it, but essentially a core accounting or banking ledger, Lightning gateway, Stablesats, so like fiat and Lightning conversion, and yeah, it's really exciting to really think about the future where we believe that open source software has a huge role to play in the future of banking of Bitcoin, and so we're really building software for that purpose. Yeah, regarding Lightning, maybe the last thing, like Lightning is magical. I think like, and once you experience it, and you start to realize what's happening. There's like a facial expression that happens when when you receive your first sats over Lightning, and I visited Zonte pretty early, right when I joined Galoy. We host the Adopting Bitcoin conference in November. It'll be there again this year, and so traveling to Bitcoin Beach, where you can spend sats as if it were just an everyday thing, really, cemented that mark on me, which is like, wow, not just Bitcoin, but Lightning on Bitcoin is world-changing financial inclusion technology. And so, yeah, I feel privileged to be working in the space, to be talking to you today. So thanks.
Very cool. I've got to get down to El Salvador soon and check it out myself. But I want to start with maybe the structure of Galoy, because I think listeners may automatically assume they hear the word Galoy and they hear Bitcoin Beach and the Bitcoin Beach wallet, and they assume there's like some relationship here, but they're not sure what. Can you break down the relationship between Galoy, Bitcoin Beach wallet, the Bitcoin Beach community, and kind of how those all interact with one another?
Sure. Yeah. So Nicholas, our CEO at Galoy, this is dating back to 2019 or so, was beginning to build in Bitcoin and Lightning and kind of form Galoy, and saw let's say, I think Mike Peterson was on Tales from the Crypt, as well as What Bitcoin Did in these early days. I mean, the project Bitcoin Beach didn't even have a name. I remember like the episode was called like Community Project in El Salvador or something like that. And he was thinking, this is a perfect like use case to be building and designing and testing um, the software that he was working on building, and so contacted Mike Peterson and actually traveled down there and built the Bitcoin Beach wallet on the ground in El Zonte, with the merchants and the community members down there. And so the idea was that in the early days of the project, they started out using like on-chain Bitcoin, right? Like for those who don't know, Bitcoin Beach, it grew out of a sort of a community initiative that's centered around a place called Hope House, which was built in 10 or more years ago to help keep kids out of gangs, help provide financial, or not just financial, but like really like hope for kids in the community. If you listen to any pods with Chimbera or Jorge or Mike, you can really learn about what they were doing with computer classes and English classes and Surf para Todos, which is Surf for All, and really it was this community project. They were provided a donation with one string attached to the donation, the Bitcoin donation, which was, you can't just sell this for USD and just go about your day. Like, we want to see if it's possible to build a circular economy on Bitcoin. And so this is what the early days of the project started out to do, using available wallets, right? And so when Nicholas started building down there, um, really it was building for the purpose of building a circular economy. So thinking about not just receiving sats and sending sats, but like merchants, right? Like merchant adoption. And so this kind of rolled into what became known as the Bitcoin Beach wallet, which is a custodial Lightning wallet that has features that are purpose built for community projects and community adoption. And so you have things like built-in education, and so you can learn a little bit about Bitcoin and earn some sats for doing so. There's a merchant map, so you can find places to spend your Bitcoin, right? Because you can't build a circular economy without merchants accepting it. It's like Mike calls it the chicken and the egg, right? It's you have merchants that need to accept it, and you have people that need to earn it and spend it. And so there's a merchant map. And then one of the biggest problems, which we are continually working on, is making it easy to receive sats in many different ways, right? And so interoperability on Lightning, I mean, dating back to 2020 wasn't awesome. It's still a struggle. And we're waiting Bolt 12, and we talk about Bolt 12 and things like this. But so in the early days, we had a printable QR code that a merchant might not have good internet access or something like that, cell access. So they could have a printable QR code that people could scan and pay, right? And we've continued to evolve that as well. So now it's a LNURL pay code, Lightning address, usernames, so that you can pay like somebody that you pay often, you can pay them. And yeah, the other thing of the merchant map was almost a marketing tool for merchant adoption to say, hey, don't you want to be listed on this map? We have a community and we're spending Bitcoin and we would like to put you on the map. So it's been really cool to see like BTC Map surface, like what an awesome project that is, and we've been connecting with them and how we can integrate. Um,
Yeah.
and and so yeah, so that was so the Bitcoin Beach wallet was really a proof of concept for the Galoy open source Bitcoin banking stack, right? So Galoy is building, a developer platform that could speed up, development for enterprises, some of the biggest companies in the world, and really building this, strong platform with continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline, and really scalable cloud architecture, underneath the surface. And then you have this like community wallet, connected to Bitcoin Beach. So the Bitcoin Beach project is, the individuals, the community members who have really, I mean, uh, created a ripple that I don't even, we're going to look back and just think, wow, because there's so many communities around the world following in their footsteps. And then the wallet was built as a tool to help them reach their goals. Um, yeah,
Very cool. I wonder why there are so few tech products focused on communities. There's like when you hear about a tech product and you talk to the founder, they go, I'm building a B2B app or a B2C app. And it's just either businesses or consumers. There's very little focus on communities, groups of people. And I mean, there's some examples that are not really in the tech space. If you think about like there's community food initiatives, there's little food banks, and there's housing, community housing and things like that. But why was Galoy's focus on the community here with this Bitcoin Beach project? Why not on individuals or a corporation?
yeah. I think it stems from the idea that, like, we're like a Bitcoin, I'll speak for myself, but I think a lot of us are like Bitcoin adoption maxis. Like, we believe that access to Bitcoin benefits everybody. And like, when you think about making, um, getting people into Bitcoin, like in many areas of the world, like drawing the quote unquote global south here, but in many areas of the world, like we've got a 1.5 billion people who are unbanked, um, and I think that we realize that the Lightning Network, so Bitcoin, the network, is incredibly important, incredibly useful, and as I mentioned, a tool for financial inclusion. And so the way in which we see that spreading, or at least the role that we play, right? There's many different roles that different companies play, is to get more people into the Bitcoin network, to put them on the path towards self-sovereignty and self-custody. And a wallet, a Lightning wallet that has features that are built for communities to interact and to grow, is just like an amazing niche to be building on. And like I mentioned, like BTC Map, like I think that this is something that is actually growing, I would say. So maybe like historically this isn't the case. Um, but if you think about like adopting Bitcoin 2021 in November, there I met like Patrick from Bitcoin Lake, like in the airport, and he's like, "Yeah, we're starting a project." And Fernando from Bitcoin Beach, Brazil, reached out and started to communicate with him, and to see how far they came in 1 year to where they were presenting on stage this year talking about the success. We went from like one Bitcoin Beach to 10 to now there's 100 that are at different stages of their development. And so I believe that as a global network of communities or a community of communities, so to speak, that like the Bitcoin companies and developers and builders are starting to be like, wow, like that is a really important piece of this puzzle, getting people into the network and then enabling them to communicate with each other to send value to one another. And so, yeah, it's an interesting observation, and one that I'm really bullish on like this year and in coming years because it's I actually shared a map or I did a call recently and had a slide that had a map and it had maybe 30 different logos of different community projects on it. And somebody who was in the meeting said, "Hey, can I post this to Twitter?" And I said, "Sure." And she did that. And next thing you know, it's like cascading around Twitter, and people are like, "What about me? What about me? What about me?" And so it started this conversation of like, yeah, we really should create a map to show how many there are because, for instance, the BTC map site does have like a communities page, and there's like 200, and they range from like meetups to community projects like a Bitcoin Ikasi or a Bitcoin Beach Brazil. Um,
Right.
yeah,
Now, I think many listeners are familiar with Bitcoin Beach. I think that's probably the most famous one still at this point. What are some of the lessons you guys have learned and been able to pass along to other communities as they try and build their community? Any lessons that you took away from that first experience at Bitcoin Beach that are applicable to other communities?
for sure. Actually, the first thing I did when I was hired at Galoy was to write an article called "Lessons Learned from Bitcoin Beach," right? And I'll share it for the show notes or something. But it breaks down the journey of building a wallet on the ground in a community like this. And I think there's takeaways for both community leaders as well as for app developers. And there's a couple that something that's really inspiring is to see the other communities taking those lessons, implementing them, and then also contributing back the things that they're learning. But a couple of the ones that come to mind are like education is just central to everything that you're doing, and also that education does not necessarily mean lecturing. It means like showing, right, and sending sats. Also in youth education as well, because as we saw with social media, even from the early days, like technology lands in like the teenager to range on either side, and then those folks get their parents involved and teach their parents because the younger generations are typically very comfortable with technology. And I think that's something that's been replicated really well in Bitcoin Lake. They're partnered with a school in Bitcoin Beach, Brazil. Fernando fixed a computer lab that was not operational for a couple of years and taught the kids, yeah, and then brought some curriculum in, right? So like Mi Premier Bitcoin, who just launched their English version of their curriculum and open sourced it, is also going to make a dent in the world, I think. And yeah, there's a number of other lessons. I'll just mention maybe one or two more. Um, in Bitcoin Beach, the having an ATM, so they did not have banks in El Zonte nor ATMs like fiat ATMs. But when they got a Bitcoin ATM and people saw that like they could take their sats and like get physical cash for it, I think it clicked, right? Because if you've never had a bank account, you've never done digital banking, this digital money I think is not as maybe tangible. But once you have the ability to cash money out and you go, okay, actually, I think that turned a lot of people um, into like, yeah, you know what, I will accept this for my store. Um, yeah,
So prior to El Zonte and the kind of like Bitcoin Beach project, the only way to move value was physical cash, correct?
correct. Yeah. And
Wow.
that was another lesson too. You have to make accepting Bitcoin easier than accepting whatever they are accepting today. And so this is where sort of the LN URL like printable pay code was really useful, because if you have a roadside shop making pupusas, and you're used to somebody putting $1 on the table, you're actually going to get your phone, creating a lightning invoice like this. These are steps that like are not actually necessarily easier than what you're used to, and we're humans, we don't like change, and so having like the printable pay code on location just to scan it and pay is what triggered like a lot of merchants to be like, wow, that's even better than accepting cash.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So now we're about 18 months, I believe, since the Bitcoin bill, the Bitcoin law went into effect in El Salvador. Prior to that, Bitcoin Beach, of course, already existed. But what have you noticed in the last couple of years in the Bitcoin Beach community? Have you seen any like fundamental changes about how people go about their day-to-day lives, the jobs that people have, the ways in which they send and receive money? Any other kind of impact you think that the Bitcoin law and this Bitcoin Beach movement has had on the people of El Zonte?
Yeah, I mean, El Zonte is an absolutely magical place to visit. And having the privilege of being there in November 21 and then November 22, this, just a couple months ago, I was blown away by the amount of development that's happening. Improving existing buildings, building new structures, or community spaces. I think that I mean, there's a New Story is a NGO or an organization that builds affordable housing, and so they're building 100 and some houses that are allowing people to become homeowners for the first time. And I think uh, the most striking difference, or what's happening due to Bitcoin Beach in sort of the El Zonte area, and I think it's starting to permeate elsewhere, is the focus, is the hope, right? So if you speak to, you listen to the team from Hope House, Bitcoin is important, and a big piece of what they're doing, but what they're doing is bigger than Bitcoin itself. I would say it's Bitcoin is a tool for them, because in a decade ago, you wouldn't be dreaming about starting a business, or thinking about your education as much as what you're seeing today. And Mike Peterson did a great pod on Jimmy Song, and talked a lot about this, which is the focus on education, on entrepreneurship, is really astounding to see. And I think that this is because you now have the ability, Bitcoin provided this community the ability to accept digital payments for the first time. It provided this idea that you don't have to leave to sort of have a career, or kind of break out of maybe the condition that you were born within. And I think that hope has become infectious, and you can feel it. It's really awesome.
Do you have any numbers on the adoption within El Zonte today? Anything that you can, or just like your rough estimates based on your experience there? How many people, or what percentage of people are actually using it on a daily basis? And how do you grow that pie and make sure that this continues to expand rather than just is, a flash in the pan? Like, how do you continue and make this sustainable and allow this circular economy to spread?
Yeah, I mean, I think in El Zonte, it's very significant, because of the fact that El Zonte has become a mecca for Bitcoiners. I think I mean, there are people that are living there, working from there, working on Bitcoin, and from where I saw it, like everywhere is accepting. Most places are accepting Bitcoin, not everywhere. And But then, like, there's also sort of El Salvador at large, right? And so Bitcoin was introduced to El Salvador as a law, right? As legal tender, as a law, and they launched Chivo, right, a wallet from the government, and they provided money for folks. And so I think that, like, the adoption at a country level is not in a straight line, right? And so you see a lot of people downloading the wallet, getting the money, getting out of Bitcoin, and then there's some folks I love to see the folks who are doing travel like throughout the country and sharing their experience, because there are places who maybe they did accept Bitcoin, but now they don't. And I think that the way that you grow that is through education. I think that one of the missed opportunities with sort of the if we look back and said how might we do this differently is baking the education alongside the app, right? Is making sure that people understand like that how to create a like what Lightning is and how to create a Lightning invoice, right? I think Chivo by default originally had sort of an interledger QR, and it creates problems, right? And nothing will scare you away from new technology faster than it not working. And so even when I came into the country, and this happened like the other day to somebody else, like um, the people don't really quite know how to use the wallet, and so you're creating this friction, and I think that that is tamping down the speed of adoption, and that's that's one of the things that I think Premier Bitcoin has done an amazing job of trying to solve. Right, it's I mean it's a monumental effort to educate people. And that's one of the things that we're focused on with the Bitcoin Beach wallet is making it incredibly simple to accept Bitcoin, making it um, providing not just like education that you can learn, but also UX that feels comfortable and allows you to troubleshoot. One example is I mentioned we have the LNURL pay code, which you can print and put at your shop. Not all Lightning wallets can scan that, right? And so if you scan it with any number of wallets, you're going to get an error, and now you have a customer saying, why can't I pay this, right? And like if you don't have a Lightning expert on the ground and explaining what's going on, that it's a payment format or spec that is not supported. And so the those QR codes, those LNURL QR codes, have like a fallback, and you can scan that with a camera and get taken to a web app. And so that person can create a Bolt 11 invoice via the web app. And one more note on that, I think a problem with adoption is also like most stores in the world are like 1 to 2 employees or 2 to 4 employees, right? Like there are many, many, many like tiendas and mercados and I think that the way that many are adopting are saying, okay, the owner has a wallet, and if the owner's not around, like Bitcoin's not working, right? Or like we're not, and so the we call it the cash register. It's a web app that like an employee could save as a app on their phone and accept Sats on behalf of the business without having the ability to send Sats out of that wallet, right? And so I think that there's a lot of actually UX um, issues that, if solved well, could actually promote merchants to accept Bitcoin. And then the last one is Stablesats. So one of the biggest issues with onboarding somebody, a merchant especially, to Bitcoin is especially in the developing countries or the sort of the unbanked population, is that they don't have the privilege of being orange pilled for $1,000 before they start accepting Bitcoin. They say, sure, I'll try it. They earn $50 worth of Bitcoin, and they log in the next day, and now it's $40, and they have to pay rent or their suppliers, and that is not something that comes very easy. It's a journey, and so by introducing Stablesats, which allows people to hold USD in their Lightning wallet, you're letting the merchant or the individual decide how and when to become to have more of their money in Bitcoin, and you allow them to sidestep that volatility for like short-term expenses.
Right. Now, Stablesats and the idea of stablecoins in general is a thorny topic in Bitcoin. There's a lot of people with strong opinions on both sides. What's your sentiment for the reality of the situation in, let's say, El Salvador today? What percentage of people are using stablecoins as a tool, or Stablesats as a tool to protect their wealth versus holding their wealth in Bitcoin?
Yeah. I it's funny. It's like it's not that thorny in on the ground. I would say like again, I think
More
that
on Twitter.
people approach Bitcoin from different directions. And for all of us who approached it through the 1,000 hours of education and like understanding it's the hardest money and you need to self custody, and why would you ever let uh, uh, anything but Bitcoin touch your, like come into play? Um, the way I kind of look at it is like I think a lot of those viewpoints come from people who are using Bitcoin, the asset, as a long-term savings tool, and not like there are many, many people that come into Bitcoin or Lightning as enabling digital payments, right? And they're not quite ready. They don't have savable income oftentimes at the beginning, right? And they like, and so that's where the journey, and that's where I think Stablesats is extremely powerful because it allows you to hold value constant while you're again for short-term expenses while you're onboarding to Bitcoin without touching ETH or Tron or like without touching a lot of like anything else. It's a Lightning wallet, right? It's within a Lightning wallet, so it's very simple. It's Bitcoin only. There's no token, and so I'm a huge proponent of like stable set, and it's not just because like that's my view because I also like have a good internet connection. I save Bitcoin, self custody, all this. It's more of like the feedback that we receive is that stable sats is like a final hurdle that people on the ground have is something to allow people to earn money and know it's going to be that same amount of USD denominated value or fiat denominated value for some period of time. Because one story that really hit me was in my early days of listening to the Mike Peterson pods was, there's people that would buy cinder blocks if they had extra cash because they know that the price of cinder blocks goes up, right? So that was their savings mechanism and vehicle, right? And so in Bitcoin Lake, I've heard that similarly, merchants would say, okay, I've made some money in sats. I have sats. Now I need to buy my inventory because if the Bitcoin price were to go down 8% tomorrow, I wouldn't have the ability to buy that inventory. So they were kind of like hodling inventory. And now they can say, like I can slide it over here. I can hold it in USD until I go to the store, in a couple of days and purchase my inventory without worrying about the volatility. So I think it's a huge tool, and I think it's helping people that experience the network first, like wade into Bitcoin.
Right. Now, what do you think about the importance of stable sats and stablecoins more broadly for not just communities, but for companies and for governments and all the way up this like enterprise stack? When you think about the role of stablecoins at that level, not just as an individual within a community, how does that change, or how important might stablecoins be to large enterprises or governments?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know that I've got a great answer. I would just like the focus that we've had is it's essentially the ability to hold value without stablecoins and without fiat integration or banking integration, right? And so banking access, so to speak. And so I could see uh, um, I could see value, but I don't think I haven't done enough like digging into that space to really provide a smart answer or like a well thought out answer in terms of like how that impacts the enterprise level customers because I think a lot of times they do have the banking access, and so like the stable sats as it's designed like within the Lightning wallet is really like a product that is fit for the use case of like people needing to stabilize value, that are coming into the Bitcoin network for the first time.
Right. That makes sense. Okay, I want to get into the idea of custody because this is another one that is a thorny topic in Bitcoin. And you guys have an interesting phrase you use as a shared custody model for your tech. Can you talk about first, just as a high level, what separates that from pure self custody, pure third party custody? Where does shared fit in? I've also heard the word collaborative be thrown around it by other companies. Like, what are those two? What are the differences between those two and what you might find as full self custody or full third party custody?
Yeah, I mean, in a word, the Bitcoin Beach wallet is a custodial wallet. The users of the Bitcoin Beach wallet do not have keys or a key to the funds. It's like put that right there. The idea of kind of the community custody is that when building the wallet, it is and was built with the members of said community in Bitcoin Beach, and people within the community had access to. We're kind of providing that distribution of keys to provide an increased level of trust within the fact that like this is where the keys are now. For instance, another community building on the Galoy stack, like a Bitcoin jungle, can do the same thing, right? So there's in the Galoy stack, there's like Spectre integration for multi-sig to allow that distribution of keys. And yeah, the one of the important things I think is, so like the custodial wallet is like a very, like you mentioned, it's thorny, it's thorny, but it's also like I think just a timely topic. Like Alan Farrington posted a long note hot take on Nostr yesterday, about this, and I think that there's a lot of value, and there will continue to be a lot of value in custodial wallets. That does not mean that that we should not always push everybody to learn about and self-custody for a majority of their funds, and especially if they're saving sats. And so I kind of think about it like, in two ways. One, in many areas of the world, again, you don't have, you're not having savings, right, to self custody. Nor, I know that like Obi, Fedi says like, if you've got $50 worth of Bitcoin, it may not make sense to spend $100, or it doesn't make sense to spend $100 like, on a hardware, wallet. Now, so I think that, and I think that custodial wallets, like Nostr is a good example where, I made a joke on a space the other night. Like, I know all of you are using Wallet of Satoshi zapping each other, right, on Nostr. Like, there is utility in a custodial wallet, for reliability, speed, interoperability, things like Lightning address, et cetera. And I think that there will continue to be. And the way that we've been thinking about it is like, there are important things to look at for a custodial wallet. It should be Bitcoin only. It should be open source, and it should push user towards self-custody and educate users about self-custody, because it is really, it's one of two things. It's either a stepping stone, welcoming you onto the Bitcoin network and allowing you to experience and learn and start to earn, and gain sats before you're ready and you have a stack that you can move into self-custody, or it's just the wallet, like the everyday wallet you could reach for if you're traveling and you need something that will always work. And so that's why we've integrated NIP 57 for Nostr, NIP 05 coming, and why we're, LN we just had a bounty for LN URL withdraw. Like, we want the Bitcoin Beach wallet to be just something that always works, that even if you're a self-custody maxi, you still have it and you keep $5 on it because it's useful for zapping each other and stuff like that. And then lastly, I would say, so I mentioned there's an education section in the Bitcoin Beach wallet, and you earn some sats for learning about Bitcoin. So Kemal has led an effort to grow that section by 6 times. And so there's education about self-custody, there's right? And so, for those users who are newer to Bitcoin, we believe it's our responsibility as well, to promote self-custody, right? And so there's education about it. We're working with Seed Signer to do an integration. It'll be a little ways out, but to do an integration where you can have your watch-only wallet, and then when we have that, I think that having UX that promotes that is really important. I've been testing BitKit from Synonym recently, and they had a nice feature where it was like, if you have a certain amount of sats, it's like, whoa, wait a minute, this is beta, like, right? And I think that like you can do the same thing in a custodial wallet to say like, hey, did you know, like, you should self-custody your Bitcoin, right? And so I think that like these qualities in a custodial wallet are really important, because we do not want to create a world where everybody is using only custodial solutions. We want the custodial solutions to be available for important purposes for Bitcoin adoption or usage.
I hope you're enjoying the show so far. Just a quick message from our sponsor, Voltage. Voltage empowers engineers to integrate Bitcoin and Lightning Network payments into their business stack with an enterprise-grade experience. The team at Voltage is building the complete toolset so that you can do more than simply spin up nodes, but also understand and interpret your node's data. Their new product, Surge, gives engineers the capability to quickly solve problems and optimize operations. With node insights and visibility through time series data, you get dynamic and complex insights never available before. You can get complete control with insanely fast onboarding, advanced client-side encryption, and zero management infrastructure, making backups, networking, and upgrades simple. Get a free 7-day trial today at voltage.cloud. Right. So you're kind of nudging people to learn about taking self-custody without forcing them to. Do you have any sense for how successful these efforts have been to, in promoting self-custody, in educating people? How successful have these efforts been in actually getting people to take self-custody in some of the communities you've worked with?
Yeah, so some of these are in development. So like the education section is going to be rolling out in the coming months. The seed center integration will be, coming after that. And so, but it's been good to see that in like a Bitcoin Beach, for example, or a Bitcoin Lake, there is education that community leaders are doing around self-custody as well. So the way that I kind of think about it is that the Bitcoin Beach wallet should be a tool in the toolbox of a community leader. That is one of the things that they can use to make it frictionless and really like a good experience for the community to adopt a Bitcoin. Uh, Seed Signer, I know, does a lot of like webinars with some of the same communities and demos and things like that. I know Blockstream sent a bunch of Jades to Bitcoin Beach. I think it's a collective effort where like we are one of the teams that are providing tools for communities to adopt Bitcoin, and that there are other tools as well. And so as we build and as we develop, we will become more and more of a having those nudges because again, everybody should be self-custodying Bitcoin when they reach a level of savings that makes sense to do so.
Right. Now, I want to get back to the topic of community real quick here. And I want to think about, if someone's listening to this and thinking to themselves, I'd love to start a Bitcoin community in my town, in my region, maybe a meetup, maybe a larger scale thing. What advice can you give folks listening here about how to go about taking initiative and starting up their own kind of Bitcoin community?
Sure. Find other communities and connect. I mean, like not everybody in the world is on Twitter, or now it's Nostr, I guess. We're all leaving Twitter, I guess. But sorry, Elon. But the again, the idea of like the community of communities is so powerful. And so I actually hosted a panel at Adopting Bitcoin called "Let 1,000 Bitcoin Beaches Bloom" with Herman from Bitcoin Akasi in South Africa, and we actually had Kyle from Pleb Lab join us. It's like another type of Bitcoin community, right? And Patrick from Bitcoin Lake, and there's all of them. Fernando down in Brazil are not only following in footsteps of Bitcoin Beach and trying things out, but they're all doing really good job of documenting and sharing and paying forward the lessons that they've learned or the things that they've tried. And so we actually have a Telegram group called Bitcoin for Communities that we started, I mean, a year and a half ago, over a year ago now. And so join that. It's t.me/Bitcoin for Communities. And that's where you'll find at least a lot of these folks. Roman from Chimbera from Bitcoin Beach also has some initiatives to help other communities. And so I think that the number one thing now that this network of communities exists is to hop into Twitter or Nostr and start to connect the dots, because one of the things that I see being pretty critical to success of these communities is like, how do you leverage the Bitcoin, the larger Bitcoin community, to help your community project get off the ground? Because there is a lot of interest and excitement and sats that are around to support these projects. And so, like in Bitcoin Lake, what Patrick used to do, haven't seen it in a while, is to say, hey, I'm going to throw a pizza party at this merchant who now accepts Bitcoin, and we're going to bring 12 kids over there. Here's our lightning address. Could you help us fund the pizza party? And like Bitcoin Twitter would fund the pizza party. And I think that like this is like the way in which you channel the energy of Bitcoin at large to help bootstrap your community up, because people really want to see these communities succeed. There's been Herman's been helping like 3 or 4 different communities in Africa kind of get off the ground, and so I do think as a community leader, there is a sort of an element of networking that is crucial. That and not only will you learn like how to do things, but you'll also be able to tap into the rest of us who want to see you succeed.
Yeah. And I mean, this is a great way to have a real impact on Bitcoin. I think there's a lot of folks in the Bitcoin community. I see messages all the time that are from folks who are excited about Bitcoin, are not developers, feel kind of left out. They feel like, I wish I could, I wish I could do something. I feel like I'm, absorbing all this information. I agree with everything, but because they're not technical, that feels like a stop, like they're halted at that point. And I think there's a great case to be made here for building in-person communities and having like a real valuable thing to show for it. And now you've got this like, circular economy flowing through a group of people like that has an immediate and obvious impact on Bitcoin adoption. And so, yeah, I think as a message to folks listening who want to pursue something like this is like a great way to impact Bitcoin and to really help push the movement forward. Even if you like, I don't think there's any excuses at this point. If you want to start a community, like anyone can do that. That is not, there's no technical requirements. There's no, test you have to pass to get into the club of, Bitcoin community creators. It's, you just show up and you do it. So I'm glad to see there's so many people that are kind of stepping up and taking an initiative to, grow their own community. Are there any hurdles that you see that are blocking folks today or limiting their ability to succeed as a community? Like there's hundreds of these communities now in existence, but not all of them are at the level of Bitcoin Beach. So how do you like, what are some of the roadblocks or bottlenecks or constraints that are prohibiting or limiting people's ability to find the success that Bitcoin Beach had?
Yeah, I think the hurdle is it's hard. Like it's totally doable, and we're all here to support these communities getting off the ground, but it takes a lot. And you'll see it if you're watching the people on the ground that are standing these communities up, especially just from my observation, like the first maybe 6 months to a year, because you're knocking on doors essentially. You are cold calling to get somebody to say yes, I will accept a currency that is something I'm not familiar with for my products, which equal dollars or quetzales or rand to me, right? And so I think until you get a little bit of that momentum, now once you reach, I think, some tipping point, it starts to really compound on itself, because you have Ricky and Laura from the Bitcoin Italia podcast visiting and kind of sharing their experience and the hodling apparel. Like you have people who are really want to get behind and support the effort. But getting off of the ground, I see as being one of the hardest things. Actually, Bill from the Bitcoin Island, Philippines, had a fantastic presentation at Adopting Bitcoin, where he was kind of sharing like tips and like sales tactics, quote unquote, for how they've managed to put like 200 merchants on the map, using Pouch Wallet over there. And I thought that was really interesting, because it went into some pretty simple but really powerful like marketing and just general like you know interacting with somebody who you're trying to like introduce them to new technology. And so like stickers, painting, you'll see like these communities are painting like the sides of buildings with just good like art. Like there's Bitcoin as well. Like the famous example is the trash cans in Bitcoin Beach were painted with the Bitcoin sign on them, and like you can get a gallon of paint and paint a bee on a trash can, and like you're off to the races, right? Like you're you're kind of like, but then you can extrapolate that idea and you can bring it to more and more places to help create that feeling of momentum. And I think that maybe the last thing would be you're dealing with the chicken and the egg at the same time. Is like you can put Bitcoin into people's hands, but if they have nothing to do with it, they may not really like what are they going to do? They're not, they don't really grasp or like the impact or the power. You can make a merchant accept Bitcoin, but there's nothing worse than like going through the potentially stressful or stress-inducing process of like trying to accept new form of payment, and then nobody comes to your store to ask to pay in Bitcoin, right? And so this is one of the things you'll see if you follow the Bitcoin Beach Wallet Twitter account. Like we try to welcome, it's like the welcome wagon. Like anytime people put a new merchant on, like you should share it outward with the Bitcoin community and say, hey, like here's an ice cream shop. They just started accepting Bitcoin. Like everybody send them 21 sats, right? Like it's nothing, but what it is it's the notification on your phone that like somebody's out there listening and wants to send you Bitcoin and like welcome you. So those are some of the things that I think, yeah, the challenge is that initial probably period until you have your first 4 or 5 merchants. After that, I think that it's really more about like growth and kind of herding all of the energy into the right places.
Yeah, that's right. Very cool. Okay, let's get into enterprise Lightning adoption because although Bitcoin Beach and Bitcoin Beach Wallet is like a community focused initiative, Galoy is kind of powering this initiative with enterprise grade infrastructure. And I've just been, keeping a close eye on the enterprise space across Bitcoin, and the number of companies building is growing very quickly. We have, I know there's Voltage, there's Lightspark, there's MicroStrategy, there's Galoy, there's a bunch of companies. I'm sure I'm missing many. Why is everyone so focused on this enterprise space right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when the enterprise world begins to grasp and move into Bitcoin, I think it's like I think it's associated probably with the market, right, too, which is like, we went the price, the exchange rate. Like, there was a lot of excitement and a lot of announcements for a period of time, and now and then the FTX and all the other things of 2022 hit, and I think that the enterprise is a little bit like tamer or quieter. And I was actually listening to Elise Colleen on with Lynn Alden on Preston Pish recently, and she was like, it feels like it's time. It feels like the enterprises are starting to say, okay, we're ready. I don't know if it's a sense of like, okay, we've reached the bottom of the bear or whatever, but um, the it's a not, I wouldn't say bigger problem than bottom up or like the community adoption per se, but it is a there's a massive impact to be had of to bring a company into Bitcoin. Nicholas actually gave a presentation called the Sovereign Organization that looked into like um, airlines, right? Like they operate in many countries. They're dealing with exchange rates, currencies, banks in every country. Like they are at the epicenter uh, of the complexity and kind of technology debt that is the fiat banking system. And I think that MicroStrategy is a good example. Lightspark is a good example of um, people who are I would say doing the education. I mean, the community building within the enterprises to introduce people to what it means to come into Lightning. So Lightspark just launched, I think, this past week, like the Zappo Bank, the private bank that's now integrated with Lightning, and I think that what I see is there's a maturity in enterprises that is not unlike maturity at the individual level, where like you start to experience Bitcoin. You might try a custodial solution. You're buying in a custodial solution, and then as your organization increases in maturity, you start thinking about more sovereignty. the greater impact that your organization can have with Bitcoin and Lightning. And so like that was that sovereign organization idea. And I think that like right now you're seeing like your IBEX, your OpenNode, you're seeing companies that are, I would call it testing, right? Like I come from like a world where, big tech, big health, big auto or whatever, and you say, I don't want to necessarily um, jump all the way into this Bitcoin thing. I want to uh, plug into the network and try it out. And I think that's kind of it. To me, it seems like that's where we are, and you're starting to see these enterprises. I would say the forward-looking enterprises, right? Like that are going to make a huge leap into the Bitcoin space, begin to start thinking about that. I just before I hopped on, I saw that Eric from Prospera, the free private city in Honduras, was on Stefan Livera. He was just mentioning, hey, we're talking to Galoy. We want to build on Bitcoin. We want to build, Bitcoin banking. And so from Galoy's perspective, we're building open source because we believe that as enterprises begin to move up the maturity curve toward like more of a sovereign organization or reducing the reliance on third party or counterparty risk, so to speak, that the open like building on an open source stack is going to help everybody, and we're starting to see that. There are some companies and projects being built on Galoy right now, and some of them are even contributing back like significant features or improvements to the stack, and so it's really exciting to see that we all collectively can build together and like really build a better banking system. I think that the inertia in the enterprise is just much more significant than it is at like community project type level, right? Because you're having to first of all, you have just much more layers of complexity, many more people involved, and so it is a slow process of that maturity. But we're super bullish on it, and really excited about it.
Awesome. Is the primary use case that some of these early adopter enterprises are seeing, is it that example of the airline where instead of, holding currencies in a bunch of different currencies, swapping between them, incurring large fees, you can kind of do it on Lightning as a payment rail and eliminate a lot of the fees and complexity? Is that the kind of use case that most enterprises are approaching this with, or is there another angle?
I think that is more of a vision to get to, whereas the first step is more about adding to existing payment channels, right? And again, taking a testing period, which could be a year or more, which is to say we now can accept Lightning, right? And we can and we're trying it out. I think there's a lot of um, excuse me, Bitcoin like disrupts the base layer of money, right? Like, and so the impact of it, I think, comes head head face or headlong head on into um, a lot of the there's a lot of things that enterprises need to deal with and work out to be able to make progress down that journey, with governance and custody and a lot of these things are they don't have a parallel per se in sort of the fiat and Swift and ACH and Fedwire kind of world in terms of transmitting, and so that's why I'm really bullish about what MicroStrategy is doing with their Bitcoin World Conference, where they get you only have to get a thousand or 2,000 people together to have like extreme influence in terms of like educating the enterprise level organization on how you can um, I would say start on the journey, right? Because most enterprises in the world are not even on the journey of accepting or using Bitcoin. But at the end of the journey is, like I said, the sovereign organization where you could have. I mean, some of the things that you think about is like uh, Starbucks Home Depot, like whatever company you think about, have like an app, right? And like Starbucks is an easy example because you can store $20 on your Starbucks app and you can pay right now. Like that could all be like Lightning, and like the idea, actually MicroStrategy is interesting because they're taking the tack of like rewards, right? Which is like a really um friendly, I would say, like way to test like using Bitcoin, whether it's like enterprise rewards, or like for Starbucks rewards or whatever, like buy a coffee, earn 30 Sats, and like you're stacking Sats towards a coffee. It's like a nice use case that I could see uh, being useful for enterprises that want to dabble and are not ready to say poke the bear of like, yeah, we're like a Bitcoin company now.
That's interesting. I like the Starbucks example, but a part of me thinks to myself that, you know, Starbucks is so used to doing things in a closed source fashion in their own app. How do you compel them to go, you need to be using this Lightning Network, you need to be using open source technology. For Starbucks, like I could see the case for them saying, you know what, we can do an instant and zero fee transaction in our own ecosystem. Why do we need this, outside Lightning Network? What do you say to that?
I think you make them irrelevant, and you make them jealous. I think that like, I think that Bitcoin is as big or bigger than the internet, but it's moving faster because the internet already exists and has permeated, most of the world. And so I think we are in that time. Like, did we just go through the dot-com crash, or like, where's the dot-com crash in this whole thing? But we are in this period of time where organizations that see and learn and do the appropriate education around what Bitcoin means to the world will thrive. And so it'll probably make a lot of companies. It could break a couple, and then there's going to be companies, maybe it'll be Starbucks, that kind of are mid to late adopters of the technology and do so because everybody else has been starting to do this. I mean, I don't have high hopes for Starbucks, being that they like launched NFTs and Polygon or whatever recently. I mean, the, unfortunately, the world that even the world I come from, in sort of the digital experience and advertising space, is really excited about this stuff, metaverse and NFTs and all of these things, and I think that they're a bit of a distraction. So I'm hoping like to be part of the push, for enterprise, for kind of like education at the enterprise level of like what Bitcoin means and why it's different, than a lot of the stuff that they may be being presented with.
Right. And maybe this is an opportunity then for the nimble companies that can act quickly, can be first movers, to then get a head start and kind of like open up a little advantage over larger players who may not be able to move as quickly or may be distracted with other things. I want to talk about now the not just companies, but I want to talk about the banking system at large. And talk to me about the transition there. How do we get the banking system from the closed source system it is today to one that is open source? And what does that look like? Like, how do banks and Bitcoiners cooperate? Because this has been like there's a serious tension between banks and Bitcoin. And I think you guys are kind of like saying like there's a way that we can both work together here. I'd love to hear more about the vision for like open source banking and how that relates to Bitcoin.
Yeah, yeah, I did some digging into this, and listened to a lot of the kind of the Mambus and the sort of the fiat kind of core banking material pretty recently, and there's some interesting things that like, first of all, banking historically moves very slow, right? Like it was only a couple years ago, I think it was Thought Machines that it was talking about, like it was only a couple of years ago where like using the cloud, right, was something that bank execs even entertained, right? Whereas like a lot of the world has been moving to the cloud. I know there is no cloud; it's somebody else's computer, but you get the point. And so I think banks are naturally slow, and they have a lot of again, like technical debt. Like I think a lot of the banking system is technical debt because when you have Bitcoin, like, I mean, how much of the processes and programs can be kind of extracted away by having like instant final settlement peer to peer, like the role of banking, I think changes. Um, the I think like there's a guy out of Colombia, Jehudi Castro, who had a great quote to the effect of like the benefit is for the people, and the people will seek out that benefit, and it's up to the banks to decide how they're going to reinvent or adapt to be part of this, right? And I think like that really impacted me because that's what I think we're seeing. Like I'm a big proponent of like bottom up adoption, like getting Bitcoin and the Lightning Network in people's hands, and almost kind of like the Starbucks example, bank banks being like, okay, you know what, we probably should integrate this because they kind of need that forcing function, I think, to get involved. And then lastly, I would say they're going to run parallel tracks, right? So, and like I think what a lot of banks do, especially because there's so much legacy hardware and operations, is that they launch a new product alongside, and it might even be look like a new company, right? Like I think the was it Goldman Sachs who had like Marcus, which was like a app that was targeted at a millennial audience, right? Because no millennial wants to do business with Goldman Sachs or something like this. I think that like the banking foray into Bitcoin could be similar, where they say we need to launch another bank, right? And it actually maybe there's a fiat integration with our bank, but it's going to be we're going to launch a Lightning wallet, right? And I could see this happening where it's actually like the little speedboat, which is like the innovation, which they're rather than trying to hitch it to their sort of entire corporate structure from day one, they're going to do it as a pilot project, and actually they do this, right? And what they'll do is rather than ever shutting down the old system or planning to like, tail out the old system, they're like, no, the customer of the future wants to use Bitcoin. So we need to build a product that the customer of the future wants to use. And our current customers who are using Goldman Sachs are going to get older, are going to, like over time, this is like, in 30-year windows, kind of thinking about the time horizons. I think that banks are going to start saying like, we need, we need to build on this. It's kind of like the idea that holding a little bit of Bitcoin is less risky than holding none, right? Like if you're just to run the probability, I think the same thing goes with experimenting with building on Lightning, and exposing some of that to your customer base and testing it out because I think that the market is going to say yes, I want that. And if the bank sticks their head in the sand and decides not to find any way to evaluate or test the sort of the business value of being integrated with Bitcoin and Lightning, I don't think they're going to be around for the next 20 or 30 years.
Yeah. Now, in solving this, chicken and egg problem of getting demand and getting then merchants and banks and enterprises to adopt this technology, is there a way to convince enterprises, merchants that they need to step up and get start accepting Bitcoin or integrate Bitcoin prior to demand arriving? Or does it need to be the case that, demand has to be there first before they're willing to even entertain that idea? Have you seen, and especially at the large scale, like I can see how you can maybe contact a small business and call them up on the phone and give them a whole, convincing argument for why they need Bitcoin. And maybe at a local level, you can actually have an impact on their business. But what about those large enterprises?
Yeah,
How do you convince them, that but prior to demand arriving, that this is a good idea to get in front of?
yeah, I think that education and outreach at the enterprise level is really important. And so, like, banking execs or enterprise, goods, products, services, company execs are just humans that are, some of which are probably on their own Bitcoin journey, some of which whose son or daughter might have, like be in their ear about Bitcoin. And so I imagine that there is general curiosity among among these people. Now, it's probably a level of fear, for lack of a better word, that like at some point, if you learn enough about Bitcoin, your colleagues who are not down the rabbit hole can look at you crazy for saying, should we try something around Bitcoin? And so I think like regardless of what happens like with the market and the price, I think everything that happens, it's like they say like everything is good for Bitcoin, right? Price up, price down, shitcoin casino crashes, whatever, like all of it is at the end of the day, I think drawing people into learning about why Bitcoin is important, and even at the government level, right? Like you have the hearings. There was one yesterday I didn't get to watch. So I think it's this slow process of differentiating Bitcoin and educating people about why it's different and why it's impactful. And I do think that again, whether it's like the MicroStrategy event or like TabConf, I think like the conferences, like making the conferences accessible to people who are not necessarily orange pilled all the way, like is actually important as well. Kind of like tailoring content for people who are not already here. We actually did we had an event in Panama with some like a small like mini conference, so to speak. That was more educational, right? It was like you start from the beginning, like you start with the Fidelity Assets or the bullish case for Bitcoin chart to go like, gold, fiat, Bitcoin, like here's some qualities and why they're different. And you kind of pique the interest. And I think that what you'll see, and again, I think it takes time because not only does it take time to go down your personal journey, but it takes even more time to, as an organization, you're having to educate other people in the organization who are all decision makers. And so I think that's really the key is like providing content. Like we actually have like kind of like a long form article in process called Bitcoin Banking for Organizations, which kind of goes through some of the parallels of like traditional banking, Bitcoin, and like it starts about Bitcoin at a very introductory level, right? Because you can't assume like you actually, it's not a good thing to come in like laser eyed to like an enterprise board meeting or something like this. Like instead, you've got to like meet them where they are, and present to them like potentially the lost opportunity of not learning, right? And I would like propose the learning instead of the you should build on Lightning. It's like no, you should learn about this stuff, and I think they'll come to their own conclusion.
Makes sense. All right, I want to jump into the lightning round. I have a few rapid fire questions for you. Are you ready?
I think so.
I hope you're enjoying the show so far. Just a quick message from our sponsor, Stackwork. Stackwork is a lightning powered platform for generating high quality transcripts of all your audio or video content. They combine AI engines and hundreds of human workers all over the world who are paid over the Lightning Network to assemble these transcripts. And that's what lets Stackwork create better, faster, and less expensive transcripts. To see the results for yourself, you can check out my personal website where I host transcripts for all my podcast episodes. If you want to learn more about Stackwork, visit stackwork.com. That is STAK work.com. Okay. First one. What is one of the many communities that are Bitcoin communities today that you think folks on Twitter, folks listening to this show, the Bitcoin community online should be paying extra attention to? Anyone in particular among the hundreds that are live today?
It's hard to single one out, but Bitcoin Beach Brazil, pay attention. They've recreated the school store concept with Bitcoin, and kids are buying bananas with Bolt cards. It's insane. So Praia Bitcoin / Bitcoin Beach Brazil. Find them.
Very cool. What is one book that has changed your view of the world?
Oh my God. The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth. I give it to everybody who is curious about Bitcoin because it's not a Bitcoin book, but if you believe the thesis, you are on the path to becoming a Bitcoiner.
Makes sense, and a great book. If you could only hold one asset for the next decade and it could not be Bitcoin, what asset would it be?
Lumber.
Lumber. Okay. How come?
Man. Well, it's a bit tongue in cheek because it would take me too long to think of a proper answer. But I like building things. I have a lot of things that I want to build, and lumber is critical to like the low time preference, like build the Citadel. So,
Very cool. If you could change one thing about the Lightning Network, what would you change?
um, I would I would I would focus and solve the interoperability between wallets issue. I think that it makes things hard for people on the ground who are not Bitcoiners. All of us are fine with like failed payments, but that's a real problem. Failed payments and error messages. So I would whether it's Bolt 12 or otherwise, I would focus on that as a priority.
Nice. And then finally, who's one person in the Bitcoin or Lightning community that you'd like to give a shout out to for doing great work?
Noor, Noor is CEO, Bitcoin Beach Wallet, organizer of Adopting Bitcoin, a huge resource, and is doing big things and is really accessible in terms of educating and driving forward. Just an awesome person in the space. So shout out.
Love it. Thank you for taking the time today. Where can listeners go to learn more about you and Galoy?
So for me, AG Begin on Twitter and every other social network, Galoy.io for the website, or biz@Galoy.io for if you're interested to build on it. And then Bitcoin Beach Wallet. So search Bitcoin Beach Wallet in the App Store and or bbw.sv for the website. And at BTC Beach Wallet on Twitter.
Awesome. Thank you again for the time, and hope we can do it again soon.
All right. Cheers. Thank you.
In the last 7 days, you guys sent in 56,136 sats, and that came in from 35 different supporters. And this is all just from Podcasting 2.0 apps. There were other funds that came in through Nostr that are not here on this dashboard in the same space that I can see them. So we're just looking at Podcasting 2.0 stuff, but thank you to everyone who's been sending zaps on Nostr as well. First, let's run through the top 5 supporters of the week. We have Dave Jones from Castamatic sent in 12,532 sats. I Love Sushi sent in 10,888 sats. Nick sent in 9,800 sats. Natgas Immersion sent in 8,296 sats. And an anonymous user sent in 4,410 sats. Now, of course, these numbers, many of them are half of the actual amount that person sent in because, of course, every episode I split my show earnings with a guest. So Oscar would get half for the previous episode and I would get half. So just keep that in mind. We have a number of comments as well. So we had I Love Sushi sent in 22,222 sats to the show, which got split among the show split participants, and said, Oscar is one of my favorite interviewees. Thanks for having him back for a follow-up. Thank you for the massive boost. I Love Sushi, and glad to hear you liked it. We have a user with a name so long that I know I'm going to mispronounce it. They sent in 100 sats and said, Let's Go VN. I believe that is Let's Go Vietnam, in response to episode 85 with Albert Boo. Nick sent in 20,000 sats, said, Congrats on number 100. Here are 100 sats for every episode so far, plus another 10,000 as a bonus. Keep up the great content, Kevin. Thank you, Nick. Nick has been a supporter since day one. He's at Fountain building the app. Thank you, Nick. Orange Pill app sent in 500 sats and said, amazing episode as always. Thank you to the guys at Orange Pill app. We have an anonymous user who said, watched on YouTube. Interesting product. Sent 1,000 sats. So I guess this was their first time maybe trying Fountain. Glad you were able to send a boost. Thank you for the sats. Vake sent 1,000 sats and said, Fountain has come a long way. I agree. Although I think we're just getting started still. We are in the very early innings of Lightning innovation. New Legacy sent 1,000 sats and said, great to hear the progress of Fountain.fm. Looking forward to your 200th episode. So am I. I'm glad you're enjoying Fountain, and thank you for the sats and the kind words. Yeah, Sayer sent 100 sats and said, thanks for the episode and Fountain to Kevin and Oscar. We got some people creating clips. Tony Fontana sent in 800 sats and said, always nice to have an update from Oscar. Thanks. All these again are in episode 100. Blogging Bitcoin created a clip. Coach Carbon sent 100 sats and said, congrats on episode 100. Shout out to Oscar too. Fountain is the way. Value for value. And sats the standard. Coach Carbon also watched episode 99 with Desiree Dickerson and said, loving this conversation. Gaming is the way. Enjoyment and competition has my wife and I hooked on Bitcoin blocks. That is a very addicting game. I've tried it out already, and Thunder really knocked it out of the park with that one. TN Stacker sent 100 sats and said, excellent interview. Are we seeing our way to direct monetization of everything? I imagine a world where we walk around zapping each other in real life. Pay for that coffee, zap the store. Really like that server, zap the server, not the store. Hey, miss, nice shoes, zap, zap. Less than 10 years? I don't know. That's a really interesting question. There's a lot of stuff that can be zapped, but I'm not sure that zaps are the perfect answer to everything. I think it's like a complementary feature that can replace some things. Maybe it replaces tips, but I don't know that zaps are the answer for every single payment in the world. Either way, thank you for the comment and for the sats. Well, that was a big episode. Thank you guys for sending in sats. Appreciate the support. Can't wait to see what you guys send in this week.